I can. My name is Dave Derrick. I'm a financial advisor, class of 97, economics major. I'm calling from Chicago, where I live and work, but I have Davidson and non-Davidson clients that we help all over the country. I work for Northwestern Mutual, and one good thing about working for Northwestern Mutual is we often work in partnerships in teams. So I'm lucky today to be joined by Marty Burch out of the Charlotte office, also a Davidson grad. Marty, you want to say a few things about yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. I was class of 08, so I'm a certified financial planner. Finished at a really good time, 08, financial crisis, great time to come out of school. I was a poli-sci major, so did a lot. I avoided econ, and now I'm a wealth management advisor, financial planner. So I've been doing this since I graduated in 08, and really excited to work with Dave. And hopefully this is helpful for everybody. We have some good perspective here on different things to think about. A lot of this depends on where you are at life stages, and sometimes it helps to hear different perspectives about what people who are older or younger appreciate at different stages and what things you can glean from that. So I think the majority we understand of you all are kind of in the younger 22 to 30 bracket. So we'll try to tailor it more to that, but also give you some things to think about that'll help for the long-term stuff. So excited to be here and appreciate it.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump in. We do want this to be a free-flowing conversation. So if you have any questions, speak up. We'll pause a couple times during the presentation just to ask if there are any questions, but put them in the chat if you want, or just come off mute and ask. We want this to be interactive, but let's jump in here. Let's see if I can get the presentation going. All right. This is where we like to start. This is true, I think, for life for a lot of people, but also financial planning is what we've been it for. There's a whole lot of information out there. There's a whole lot of financial vehicles out there, inflation, unemployment, what's going to happen with capital gains rate, taxes, all these things. So one of our jobs, Marty and me, is to help take things off the plate of our clients, but also to simplify and educate our clients and people we want to help. So just wanted to throw that out there, and hopefully this presentation will be just that, try to make this overwhelming subject a little easier to digest. Like I said, any questions out there, our philosophy is to be others focused. I mean, it's putting clients first, and we structure all of our meetings around that, what our clients' goals are, what they want to discuss, what's important to them. So we always like to start by asking, any questions out there. This is a little different because Marty and I are presenting, but if you want, anybody wants to say what's on their mind, maybe why they decided to come to this meeting, or anything, put it in the chat or speak up. We'll just pause just for a couple seconds for that if anybody has any initial questions.
It's okay if you don't.
It's all right if you don't.
Oh, okay.
We have here a few that we hear a lot. You might be thinking some of these, so you're not alone if you do. Am I making the right decisions with my money? When can I stop working so hard? How can I make my money work harder? Am I on track for retirement? How can I afford to send my kids to Davidson and not go broke? That's a good question. When I'm 75, will I have to be a Walmart greeter? Let's hope not. And how can I be swimming in it? Also a good question. So we like our cartoons here, as you'll see throughout the process here. We're very serious people. Today's agenda.
One question.
Sure,
Sorry
fire
to
away.
interrupt.
Please.
We have a question from the crowd in the chat, and it says, how to open my own investment accounts outside of 403B through the employer.
Great. Marty,
that's something we can, that's something we can discuss sort of offline. It's not difficult to do. I don't want to mispronounce your name, Ikra, but we can help you with that as well and give you some guidelines. So For teachers out there, a lot of times, if you are a teacher, they have what's called a 403B, which functions the same as a 401k. But a lot of times the school system makes you set it up through different options. And so, but just a side note there.
Yeah, and we'll leave our information, you know, like Natasha said, it's being recorded. And at the end, Marty and I'll have our presentation. So, you know, if you have any questions you want to email us about afterwards, hit us up, you know, on that, look at that last slide for contact information. Also, you can find us on LinkedIn. I'm on the Davidson College LinkedIn page. I'm on Davidson Connect as well, David Derrick and Marty Burch. So you can find us either. And the Northwestern Mutual email structure is very easy to remember, not quite like Davidson's but it's david.derrick@nm.com and marty.burch@nm.com. Easy to remember, Northwestern Mutual. So here's today's agenda. Like I said, we always want to start with our clients' goals, and we want you to think about what your goals are. So we'll talk about that. Preparing for retirement, something we hear a lot, maybe not from people in their 20s, but more so when people get in their 30s and 40s and start, you know, inching closer to retirement. Think about it a lot. You know, investment strategies, you know, we already had one question about that, so we'll cover that topic a little bit. Pay less in taxes. I think something 99% of people want to do. Only a few people, and those people live in Portland, that don't mind paying more taxes. And then assess your current spending plan. Go into that. Protecting your most valuable asset. I promised some Steph Curry references here, playing some defensive side of the basketball court. So that's the defensive part of our presentation. And then key estate planning documents, important for any age, but especially when you get families in place. And then planning for college expenses, whether that's Davidson, UNC, Harvard, you know, whatever. Just not Duke. Don't send your kids to Duke. Goal setting. So we talked about it. Everybody has their different goals, and that's how we want people to structure their plans around. You know, whether that is, you know, owning a nice home, a vacation home, maybe spending time on the beach with your family, or maybe your goal is being as buff as this guy right here. Marty, is that you and your family at Wilmington Beach? Is that you?
That was me. That was me a few years ago. COVID was rough. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Marty put some pounds on during COVID. So did I. Or maybe your goal is to send your kids to college. Great goal. Or you know, retiring and living it up on the beach, either early or through your thing. So a lot of common goals there. But when we say, you know, in order to reach those goals, you know, I think it's important to have a financial plan, not just, you know, 401ks or investment accounts. There's a lot of different parts to financial planning. We like to talk about it like all the different kind of tools you have. So think about all the different things you could do. You know, when you're building something, you need more than just a hammer. You know, you might need a saw, you might need a wrench, you might need screwdrivers, you might need, hopefully you don't need a mace, but you might need a mace. And so we want people to think about financial planning like that. It's more than just, you know, your 401k and investing. So there's a whole lot out there. And part of what we want to do today is just educate you on those and maybe tell you about something you haven't heard of before. So what we do is we build financial plans, and there's like I said, a lot of different parts to it, and we'll go through some of those today, not all of them. But it's really about starting a base, whether that's an emergency fund or protecting your assets, playing some defense, or setting yourself up for retirement. You know, we already talked a little bit about 403Bs and 401ks, you know, starting to chalk that money away for later in life. Estate planning, just getting your stuff in order to protect those who you might leave behind. And then investments, you know, one of my favorite subjects to talk about, really, you know, exciting because it's following the markets every day. And then also saving for college, whether that be Davidson or another fine institution across the country. But as we start getting into building these plans, saving is the most important thing we want people to do. And we often get like, well, how much should I be saving? How much should I be saving for retirement? How much should I be saving for my house? And just a good rule of thumb is about 20%. And I know there are some young people who maybe just graduated from Davidson or from law school or med school. just kind of maybe have some debt, it's hard to save 20%, but just something, you want to start working towards. And then just about 60% going towards essential expenses like, your mortgage, if you own a house, or rent, groceries, things like that. And then about 20%, you can spend on discretionary, traveling, playing golf, whatever is important to you. And then we break those goals that we talked about earlier down into multiple different time horizons, and because there are financial instruments that match those time horizons. So, when we talk to people and when, you think about what your goals are, we want you to think about what they are short term. Like, what do I want to accomplish like in the next year or two? Is it to get married? Is it to buy a condo? And then midterm, what do I want? Maybe start a family, or, start building up my savings college funds if I have kids. And then long term, when I want to retire, when I want to be financially independent, and what I want to do, in that time. And there are different financial instruments that we line up with that based on liquidity, access to them, but also tax strategies. We'll talk about those a little bit. And like I said, starting saving 20% is what we encourage our clients to do, even more if they can. But if you're not there now, don't worry about it, but just maybe start making a goal to saving 1% more each year. If you're saving 5 now, do 6 next year, and 7, and so on, working towards saving that 20%. But this is a graph that just stresses that point. The earlier you save, the more your future self is going to thank you. So in order to, this graph just shows how do I get to $1 million by age 65? If you're 25, you only have to save $381. But as this graph shows, the later you start, the more you have to save every month. So if you don't start saving until, say, age 35, you've got to save $800 a month to get to $1 million. Age 45, by my age, if I hadn't already started saving, I'd have to save, $1,900 a month versus just continually $381. But I know a lot of people, you do start late. My wife has her PhD, so, she wasn't able to start saving until she was 30, because she had 7 years of education. So, we also realize, especially among the Davidson crowd, people are going to med school, law school, grad school, business school. So it's, it might be tough to start saving 381, through your 20s and 30s. But, just something to keep in mind when you start saving early and save a lot early. Your compound interest is in your favor, but also just establishing great habits that your future self will thank you for. So let me just pause right there. We've talked a little bit so far. Before each section, I'd like to just ask, are there any questions? Looks like we have a couple in the chat here, but that was from earlier. Sorry, I was just getting to the chat. But let's just pause just for a few seconds. If anybody has any questions, speak up or throw it in the chat. If not, we'll move on. Okay, great. Marty, you want to talk to us about retirement?
Yeah, I think also to sum up a lot of what Dave was getting at in terms of when we design financial plans for people, right? A lot of our job is not necessarily just numbers based, right? There's a lot of counseling involved. So the subjective side of this is actually the harder side than the actual fact piece. So figuring out, what do I want? What am I trying to do? That dictates what happens with people's money within their plan. And our whole goal is to say, because we have a structure we know where money's going, whether it's to saving, spending, buying a house, doing this, doing some of these other things, it gives them the freedom to feel good about what they're doing with their money. Whether it's, I have student loans, how much should I be paying towards that? How do I refinance those and still save, right? I know that's a big thing we've helped clients deal with, to how do I save enough money to buy a house? 20% down is a lot of money. How should I do that and not just have money sitting in cash for 3 years? So there are a lot of different things goals that you try to help figure out. Where do I want to be? How do I pay for this as we go? So that's what the plan really tries to help people with, whatever your goal at your stage might be, right? And as folks get a little older, it's, hey, I'm making this money. Am I being efficient with it? Is it going to the right place, right? Am I splitting it between saving for myself, enjoying it, and being responsible with it? So I think the biggest thing we get the question, even from younger folks, right? It's overwhelming when you're younger and just out of college. There are folks with student loans, or you're not, you feel like between rent and saving for a house or whatever you might be doing, how do I know how much to save for long-term goals, like a retirement in my 401k? You hear about those all the time, 401k, 403b. How much should I save into that versus, spend and have in liquid, emergency cash? So that's what we try to balance out with folks when we work with them, is finding a true balance so that you can enjoy your life, be responsible, and, not feel this pressure like, am I doing the right thing? I think, David, you can go to the next slide here. So I think the biggest thing you want to do, you always want to pay yourself first, right? So it can be overwhelmed. And what does that mean? I personally, the way everyone is different, how they quote save money. So, and it means different things to a lot of different people. There's saving money and putting it in a savings account for an emergency fund. Like if you need tires, if, your car goes down, you need a new heating and air unit, things of that nature. And it's always just going to sit in cash. That's an emergency fund. So you can save into that, and then dealing with, okay, if I have enough in emergency money, what do I do with that? And so the reason that you pay yourself first, 99% of our clients, that we meet who are 40 to 50 years old, the biggest asset that they have is their 401k and their house, meaning the equity that's in their house. And you know why? Because when they get paid, the 401k money comes out before it even gets deposited in their paycheck, right? So they don't even see it. They paid themselves first. They have to pay their mortgage. So that goes, and it slowly builds equity in their house. So most folks need a structure and a concept of paying yourself first. And if you set it up in the right way that it fits in your behavior, that's the most important thing that we try to set up for people. You can go to the next one. Pay yourself first. Yeah. If you don't, this is everyone, you set it aside, you don't know what it might be used for, but you're always going to thank yourself for, hey, I don't have to work as long because I started saving in my 20s versus my 30s, even if it's $100 or $200 a month. And the worst thing is if you do end up not saving as much as you get older. We have a lot of clients who they paid for all their kids to go through college. Their kids had really good education, but now all of a sudden they don't have enough saved and they have to rely on their children in retirement because they didn't save enough. Their kids are really well educated, so that's good. They'll take care of them, but it's the pressure that they put on their kids. So that's why you pay yourself first in the long run. 401ks, so this is the most common and easiest way to pay yourself first, right? So the benefits of a 401k, if you work for a big employer, you work for a medium-sized employer, almost everyone has this because they want to keep you as an employee. It's a tough labor market right now. So the most that you could put in, when someone says they max out a 401k, it actually means that they're putting in $19,500 of their own money per year. Now, don't freak out if you can't do that. That's fine. What we would encourage you to do is look what your company matches. Hey, they give you a 3% match, or they might give you a 3% match, and then every percentage up to 6, they give you a 0.5%. So then you get some more on top of that. So every dollar that you put in, they match. You're doubling your money every year. It's the easiest way to get free money. A lot of times there's a little bit of a vesting schedule, but that would be the first place I'd look to when you start your first job, right? Do they have a 401k? What's another thing? It's called 403b or a simple IRA if it's a small company. Someplace where you can set up and have it come out of your paycheck. There's also a lot of the bigger companies have what's called a Roth 401k, which I'll get into here. So the biggest thing for younger folks when we're looking at 401ks and how to save money, the traditional 401k, is really, really helpful, because you put in 3% of your paycheck. What happens is, if you, let's say for easy money, if you make $100,000 a year, or 50, whatever the number is, and you put in $3,000, 3% for that year, okay, then they would match and add $3,000 to that, easy numbers. If, when you put it in the traditional pre-tax money, 401k style, your $3,000 goes in, you're only taxed as if you made $97,000 that year. Okay, so that's, again, I'm just using round numbers for everybody. So it goes in before the government taxes you, goes into the 401k account. It grows, you can move it around, buy anything you want, have it grow all those years. You have to wait until you're 59 and a half, till you can take it out. And then when you take it out, that's when you get taxed. So the taxes are on the back end. That's the sad face, right? The Roth 401k is a little more painful up front, sad face up front. But once it's in, there are no taxes on anything. That it grows tax-free the whole time. And when you take it out, you pay no income tax on the money coming out, okay? So if you think about it, most people who are in their 20 to 30, you're at a lower point of your income scale, okay? So where you're probably going to advance in your career as you get older, it's better to do a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA when you're younger, because you're not paying as much in taxes. It goes in after tax, and then you're probably going to be at a higher tax bracket when you're older, and it comes out without tax. So it's a way to really leverage your money and get it in there in an efficient way. So if you forget everything we told you today, look into the Roth 401k and a Roth IRA, okay? There are some income limits. There are ways to get around that. That's where you can talk to us offline, and that are perfectly legal. But the biggest thing is thinking about pre-tax versus post-tax money. The other side is, when we think about saving money, all right, again, it comes back to, what is the money going to be used for? You can go to the next slide, Dave. So, this is, what is the money going to be used for? If it's going to be used, if I'm trying to save money for a house, right? That we're not going to be very aggressive with it. If you're putting money into a long-term retirement vehicle, like a 401k, Roth IRA, or or an IRA, those are truly long-term, where you can't touch them until you're basically 60 years old. So you can be pretty aggressive with how you invest that money. It's going to go up and down over time, but it will go up if it's done appropriately. And so it's fine to be aggressive. With shorter term money that you might be using to buy a house, pay down student loans, anything that's going to be used within 2 to 3 years, we can't be that as aggressive with. So whenever you are saving money or asking, how should I have money invested? Always ask yourself, what am I going to use the money for first? Okay, that's a key point. So on the backside, this is an important, just planting a seed here. Most of you aren't even close to retirement, right? But imagine you're 70 years old. So we work with a lot of 70-year-olds, and they say, hey, Marty, I need X amount of dollars a month. Call it, hey, I need 10 grand a month sent to my account every month. And they have these different vehicles. They have some annuity investments, 401ks, Roth, some money in life insurance. I'm going to spoil this. Most of us will not have Social Security or pensions. Okay, it's just probably not going to be feasible. Older generations have those. So we're going to have these different buckets to pull money from. And when we manage it, we're pulling money from these different buckets and distributing it to our clients in an income when they're older. And it takes the pressure off of them. If you want to go to the next slide. That was a lot in terms of different vehicles. I think the biggest thing was, look at your 401k, look at a Roth IRA or 401k if you have it through work, and then what and when is money going to be used for, right? And that'll dictate how we invest it. Dave, you have a question for me? All right.
No, not at this time, Marty. Let's just, we'll keep going. Oh, wait, I actually do have one. How exactly does taxing a traditional IRA after retirement work? Is it the whole amount
Yep.
that gets taxed as income?
Yep. Yeah, great question. So let's say you save all these years into a 401k. Okay, you built up all this money. Let's pretend it's today. You're 70 years old. You have $1 million in this IRA account. When you take it out and you say, "Hey, Marty, I want to spend $100,000 this year." Well, when you take out can I take out $100,000 from the IRA? No, I have to take out $125,000 because you get taxed on that 100,000 as ordinary income. So I have to, if you want a net $100,000, I have to take out $125,000. Does that make sense? So the more money you take out in retirement from those types of accounts, the more income you show on your taxes the older you are.
Yeah, that's assuming you're in the 20% tax bracket. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right, David T. Yeah, it would be based on your tax bracket at the time, whether that's, but it's going to be 20%, 25, whatever. Okay, great. Thanks for the question, David. That was a good one. All right, let's move on. Yeah. Marty, you got any thoughts on investing?
Yeah, I hate it. It's awful. No, I'm just kidding. So everyone buy Bitcoin and we'll be good. No, I think there's so much noise about investing, right? And anytime you go on, you can read anything on Yahoo Finance, on this and that. The world is sinking. The world is, it's going to go up forever. If you can go and find 25 articles that say the stock market is going to tank, 25 articles that say stock market is going to take off, right? Everyone wants to be right, so they love to put out their hypothesis, right? What do we do when we try to help people with money? Over time, and you can go to the next slide. Over time, and this is an eye chart. We'll send this out to people if you're curious about it. But it breaks down the different types of investments there are year by year. At the top is what performs the best. At the bottom is what performs the worst, right? And then what we try to do as investment managers, and when we help people with their money, not just as part of their financial plan, we're trying to take out the wild swings in their money, right? And give people perspective. And what's the first question we always ask? When is money going to be used? Again, if you're 25 and we're putting money into a 401k or a Roth IRA where we know we can't touch it until we're 60, we can be aggressive with it. Why? Because in the history of the stock market, over a 10, 20, 30-year period, it always goes up, okay? Now, there are going to be ups and downs to it, but it will always go up. The benefit, too, of a 401k and a Roth and investing over time is that as the stock market, quote unquote, goes up and down, you're buying at different points. So it might be up, it might be down, and it actually helps when you're buying monthly in your 401ks because it averages out to a lower cost of what you're buying in. You're buying all these little dips throughout the year. And over time, it will go up, okay? The biggest piece on the diversification, you hear that a lot, is let's take 08. So I come out of school, the stock market goes down -35, okay, the normal stock market. The next year, it's up 40%. The next year, it's up 20%. Well, that's all great, but what you really have to be patient, right, and think about sequencing of when money is invested and how it's invested. If it's for a long period of time, again, you don't really care. It's going to recover and will go up. If you're older, right, and you're 70 years old, or the money is going to be used soon, that could be a problem. If you have it invested inappropriately and the market goes down 30%, then you need to use it tomorrow, right? Or in a year, because it might not have recovered. So again, it all comes back to when is money going to be used. You can go to the next one, Dave. So the biggest thing we deal with is these are the most common things, investment mistakes, overreaction, right? I hear all this, stuff about Bitcoin, or I hear this about the market's going down, or inflation's doing this, or whatever. But it comes down to how long is money going to be invested? If it's going to be invested for longer than 5 years, then it's going to be okay. It will recover, right? So when we're breaking up how you think about money, that's the most important part. The other thing that we've seen a lot of, right, over the years, particularly in Charlotte and when things go bad, is people overreact. The two things, if you forget everything we talk about today, Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks, okay, and never pull out of the stock market when the stock market's going down. It's your inclination, right? Everyone panics, like in March of last year. Do you know how many phone calls we got from our clients last year in March when the pandemic hit? 0. I reached out and told everyone, hey, we're fine. That's why we have a plan. Your money's going to be okay. I know where, for my retired clients, where their money is going to come from. But I did have one person who I was trying to work with. We were setting up a plan. He overreacted. He had $3 million that he had been super aggressive with as a 55-year-old. And so it had done well over the last 10 years. But then he panicked in March of last year. His $3 million had dropped to $2 million. He sold everything and bought cash, essentially. Okay. What's the problem? Well, the problem is, when is he going to buy back in, right? And I called, I said, A, you weren't my client. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. But B, hey, when are you going to buy back in? And he's like, oh, I'm going to wait. Well, guess what? It recovered faster than anyone could have expected. I have no idea when he bought back in, but he lost a lot of money, right, because of that. So never overreact to these things, and don't try to time the market. Even the smartest people in this business, you never win, okay? You might get lucky, but it's really, really hard to win.
Oh, got a
Roth
question.
401k.
Oh, got a question,
Roth
Marty.
401k and Roth 403b. So they're the same thing. It's just one is for folks who work for state governments, and they're the same structure. Whether it's a teacher or nonprofit, that's what a 403b is. It's essentially for nonprofits or teachers. All right, next. Again, this is a reason. Don't try to time the market. If you stay in the market, you win, right? If you try to time it and you only miss 10 of the best days when it goes up, right? You're down to 3.5% return. So it's just, again, don't try to do it. It's not, I can't do it. I don't try to do it. Anyone have any questions on investing and diversification, Bitcoin, anything they want to, cryptocurrency, different structures? All's fair. Yeah, so how active should you be in investing? I mean, in all honesty, there is a lot of value, and typically it shouldn't cost most people. There are a lot of investment platforms that are very cheap, where it costs you almost nothing to open a Roth. How active should you be in investing your money? Again, I think you don't have to be super active, particularly if the money is for the long term. There's certain tweaks you want to have. There are a lot of different asset classes and types that you want to have within that. But once you set it, you shouldn't be day trading, right? Particularly if the goal is for a longer period of time. So I think if you look at it and rebalance, we typically rebalance our clients' money at most, for the most active, it's like monthly, sometimes, but typically it's on a quarterly basis, right? And for someone for true long term, if you look at it every 6 months, you're way ahead of the game. Dave, you there? I lost your audio.
Yeah, sorry. One more question from the audience, Marty. Does it cost to open a Roth? I think she means a Roth IRA. Does it cost to open a Roth IRA?
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't, I mean, again, it just depends. Typically you can go online or, through anyone, a broker dealer, someone like us, and it doesn't cost you anything to open these accounts. It's just a matter of how that's structured ongoing, what the funds or stocks and bonds and things within it. That's where the cost is, not in the actual account to open.
Okay, one more question for you, Marty, and then we'll keep going. Thanks for the questions, everybody. We'll try to answer as much as we can while also being cognizant of everyone's time and getting through the presentation. One more, Marty, and then we'll move on. Is there a threshold where an advisor makes sense versus managing money myself? Is there a threshold amount of money where an advisor makes sense versus managing myself?
I think that's a great question. I think the thing you have to ask yourself is, how much time am I willing to devote to this, and do I want a financial counselor? And so what I mean by that is, do I want someone who I can trust, who I can help set up a structure that will take away the pressure of knowing, am I doing the right thing, right? And so that's when you should really look to an advisor. And that threshold is different for everyone. You might feel confident in doing it yourself until you hit a certain amount of money in your life. But what we see is, if you get things set early on and have a trusted person you work with, there's really no minimum or too much money, right? It's more about your personality, and are you diligent enough to do this yourself? Or do you want to have someone help you set it up and bring a little bit of accountability to it? It's sort of like, working out. The most people, everyone is in the gym and makes New Year's resolutions on January 1st. They're all in the gym, but who's in the gym on February 1st, right? So that's where having some advisors to set up these structures really help, right? And we also see, as people get older, that it's harder just with time, right? With their jobs, with kids. As you get older, it's harder to do yourself. So typically, that's the biggest impetus, not necessarily how much money people have.
I would also just say there's so much information out there and so many different tools and strategies. I mean, Marty and I do this all day, every day, and so do the people on our team, and so do the investment strategists. There's so much to know, and I think it's hard for an individual to know all the different strategies, all the ins and outs. So that's where an advisor can come in, and I think most advisors on our team will tell you whatever you pay in fees, like we'll earn that back for you. It's, because of our knowledge, because of, like Marty said, the counseling, just because of the rebalancing and staying on top of things when that's not something you want to do on the weekends when you have time. But good questions from everybody. So let's keep going here. Let me go back to my mouse here. So this part, I think in order to start investing, in order to start saving, you want to assess your spending plan. This is a little sheet, and we can send this out to actually everybody that attended or signed up. We don't call it a budget. I think a budget is restrictive, or it sounds like a burden. We call it a spending plan. So you want to know how much you're saving every month, as you can see on the bottom here, and start working towards that 20%. But I do think this is good to do, like, every once in a while. I encourage my clients maybe like once a year to do this, just to, you might say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was spending, this much on eating out, or I didn't realize I was spending this much on, X or Y, and find some ways to optimize. But, honestly, like if you're saving 20% or more, I don't even care, what you spend your money on, as long as you're, we actually had a tagline.
You don't need to know my Starbucks.
Yeah.
You don't need my Starbucks habit.
No, or how much you're spending on your golf clubs. As long as, there was we had a tagline that was spend life living, which I thought was pretty good. And that's part of our job, is to help people balance, living their life. Live your life. We want you to travel. We want you to, enjoy a round of golf. We want you to, take Pilates or whatever. But at the same time, you got to be saving 20%. So it's just a balance. Let me take a quick question, Marty, here from Madeline. What are your thoughts on putting most of your money into an index fund like the S&P 500? Or are there other index funds that you recommend or a way of using them? So good question, Madeline. I would go back to Marty, you can chime in too, but I would go back to this slide here and we'll send it out to everybody. You know, in the last 10 years, this is pretty much right here. If everybody can see in the upper right, in the last 10 years, US large equity cap, that's something like the S&P 500 that Madeline's talking about. It did really well in the last 10 years. But if you look in the last 20 years, you know, it was not the best asset class. These are all the other asset classes that you can invest in: real estate, emerging markets, you know, like China or India. Small caps, those are companies that, you know, are small now, but, you know, someday will be as big as Facebook or Amazon, perhaps. And then there are other different things. If you look, you know, 10 years, you know, from what, 1999 to 2009, large caps like the S&P 500 were the loser of all the asset classes. So, I mean, I think it's a great place to start. But once you start building up some wealth, I think you want to diversify. And diversifying in all these asset classes is going to minimize your risk and in the long term get you a better return. So this is what the yellow, the gold is. That's a balance that's being in all these different asset classes. So you're never going to be a winner, but you're never going to be a loser either. It's kind of slow and steady and minimize all your risk, you know, less dips, you know, like we had last year. So hopefully that answered your question. Marty, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think the S&P it's more concentrated than people realize. And like you said, there are a lot of different asset classes that you want to have. We can get into more specifics on that, but I think just think of it as the S&P 500, 25% of it today of that index is made up of like Apple, Facebook, Tesla, Google, and Microsoft. All right. So it's highly, highly concentrated, even though it's 500 companies, supposedly. So it depends on how it's weighted. And so I think that's where you really just want to have a strategy of when's money going to be used? What do I want? What return is acceptable to me? How aggressive do I want to be? And then that dictates, like the balanced gold here in this chart, that's more for sort of someone in their 50s and 60s. You can still you'll be younger and have more fluctuation, but still take out the huge dips because you have diversified your portfolio.
Good question. All right. So we were talking about the spending plan, you know, trying to work towards saving 20%. But again, like we were saying, you know, we don't want people pinching pennies. We don't want people eating ramen noodle soup. You know, we want them to live their life. I want you to have fun and enjoy it, you know, so just you know, try to balance, you know, both sides. Then we said, let's get into this part where we start talking about some fundamentals here. And the first step that we want people to establish is an emergency fund. So what that is and what it's for is, you know, as we go through life, you know, we assume, you know, everything's going to go fine. You know, we're going to ride down the street here on our a bike. And there aren't going to be any bumps in the road, but actually there's a whole lot of bumps. And life can throw you some curveballs. And so we want to be prepared for those curveballs. And that's where an emergency fund comes in. What it is just about 3 to 6 months of cash, you know, however much it costs to run your household, you know, your groceries, your rent, your mortgage, whatever it is. And that's where the spending plan we talked about also comes into play. Just multiply that by, you know, somewhere between 3 and 6, depending on, you know, your situation. Like if you're single and you feel like your job is stable, you know, it could be 3. But if you have a job that isn't stable, or if you have, you know, maybe some of our families where only one person is working and they have a couple kids, you might want to save 6 months. But what that does is just help, you know, something, you know, if your car breaks down, if, you know, for whatever reason, your company loses an account and there are layoffs and maybe you're out of work for a little bit, or, you know, if you have some unexpected medical bills, or you got to fix a roof because, you know, there was hail. So just a nice fundamental, just have some cash cold hard cash stocked up, in the savings account, not under your mattress, just to be clear on that. And then I know we're talking about just debt, and we thought this might be relevant for some people, coming out of school, especially a place like Davidson, or if there's some med students or law students, or like my wife got her PhD, came out, in her late 20s with a lot of debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. So, good debt, something like your mortgage, the interest rate of my mortgage is 3%, usually like anything 5%, maybe 4% or less, because interest rates are low now. It's good debt, and just manage it as long as it doesn't bother you. We have some clients who, for whatever reason, they just hate debt. And so pay it off if that's something that's important to you. But if you're the kind of person like me that, can handle it, 3%, fine, I'll take that 3%. And then, like we saw, a diversified portfolio over the last 20 years, you're getting 7%. So I'm happy with that. Credit cards, you obviously, if you have any of that, just to get through school, you want to try to refinance those or pay those down as quickly as you can. But, with student loans, that's up in the air a lot right now with talk of paying some of that off. And I know it's been suspended, the payments, I believe, until January, if you have federal student loans. So those are good to have. Student loans and mortgage, anything, less than 4 or 5%, it's fine as long as it doesn't bother you. All right, this is the part, this is one of my, I'm a kind of a sports fan and also a Davidson fan. I promised some Steph Curry references. I'm a nerd. This is my Steph Curry rookie card, mint condition, by the way. I bought this card because I think this is the only professional sports card where somebody's wearing a Davidson jersey. So that was I'm also a Golden State Warriors fan. But this is a part of the presentation. I'll turn it over to Marty, where we talk a little bit about defense. I know Curry's a three-point shooter, but he also is a pretty good defender and has a steal. So let's talk about the defensive side. Marty, take it away.
So, let's be honest here. I was in college when Steph was in college. Defense wasn't his thing. He was opportunistic, okay? He has gotten much better and much stronger. So in terms of if you're going to do as a younger crowd, right, if you're in your 20s to 30s, the biggest things are setting up some automatic savings plans. But the other biggest thing is you might not have a family yet, or if you have a young family or married, what can derail your financial plan? The biggest part, honestly, that we see and thing that has happened to a fair number of our clients is they're unable to work, whether it be an injury, sickness, something prevents them from working, right? And so I always think about, what is your biggest asset? You insure your home, right? You have home insurance, you have car insurance. You want to ensure your ability to work, all right? And make sure that you have an income coming in, even if you can't work. So ideally, if you have, you've stuck to a little bit of a plan, you might have some 3 to 6 months of emergency savings, check that box. What we're really talking about here is if it's an extended period of being unable to work, whether that be a year, 2 years, or we have some clients who have been out of work since they were 40, right? And so you just want to look and make sure that you have what's called long-term disability income protection, okay? Disability is a harsh word. Think of it as, I'm not earning as much, right? It's income protection. Now, I've had clients, unfortunately, it can be, you don't have to be like in a wheelchair or, severely injured or anything like that. It can just be, hey, I'm working 20% less at work and making 20% less because I'm not working. So making up that gap. We can have the best savings plan set up for you possible, but if you're not working, you're not saving. So yeah, we got 5 minutes left. That was a big piece there, was just making sure majority of major employers only sponsor 60% of your pay, cover that. So you would take like a 40% pay cut, and then it would typically still be taxed. If you work for a smaller company, a startup, or you're in school, you probably don't have anything. So just something when you're looking through your benefits, 401k, Roth 401k, do I have disability coverage, long-term disability coverage? It is something that's very affordable and you can look at and get outside and find that coverage for a very cheap cost. So those are the biggest things. Life insurance wise, if you have, most folks probably don't have families. It gets more important to have life insurance if something happens to you where you pass away. As you get married and start to have kids, that's sort of when you should start looking at that types of stuff. Okay.
Okay, we're short on getting close on time, so we're just going to keep going here. But if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to follow up with you on that. I think this is something, you know, we help people with all different kinds of financial planning, and one important part is, you know, making sure they're fine on the healthcare front. You're usually, you know, if you work for a decent sized company, you're going to have a good health insurance. But we just wanted to bring a few things to your people's attention, especially a younger audience. You know, take a look at a healthcare savings account. It's one of the few things in the tax code that have triple tax savings. So like Marty was talking about the 401k, if you put money in a healthcare savings account, it can come straight out of your paycheck. You never get taxed on it. You can put that money in the market and it grows. And then if you pull it out and use it for healthcare, you won't get taxed on it. So generally for someone who's young, no kids, and healthy, this is another great way to save money on taxes. Very efficient tax vehicle long term. So take a look at that. For a single person, I think it's $3,600 a year you can put away. Think about it like a 401k for your healthcare. And then so estate planning. Go ahead. I think go ahead, Marty. But let's pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're almost done. So I think the biggest thing on estate planning, depending on where you are, you always want a healthcare power of attorney. Identifies if something happened to you, who they would call to make a decision on you. Living will, financial power of attorney, right? No matter how old you are, you should always have, and those are very, very easy to find, templates online, or employer sponsor, some LegalZoom type things a lot of the time.
Yeah, if you have a legal plan, it's always great to take advantage of that. But definitely get your will straight, especially if you're married or have a family. But even if you don't want to leave a mess behind. Saving for college, you know, this is a big one, I think, on a lot of people's mind. Davidson is, you know, for me, I think we got some people in the class of 2021 here that know how much Davidson cost. But we run models to help, you know, people plan for that. And it's a very similar way that, you know, save for retirement. The earlier you start, the better, you know, with compound interest on your side. But I think the most important thing to know is what we said earlier, you know, pay yourself first. As much as, you know, when you have kids, or if you have kids already, you know, you want to help them, you love them, but you don't want to be a burden for them in the future. So take care of yourself first. So let's wrap up here. And then if anybody wants to stay on for more questions, Marty and I can stay on a few minutes longer for questions, but Marty, wrap us up here for those who are hanging out.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of financial planning and thinking about finances is asking yourself, what do I want to do? What are my big life goals, right? What do I want? And that's kind of a hard question to ask, which is one reason a lot of people struggle with financial planning. But thinking about, where do I want to be? What do I want my life to look like? Someone just asked about passive income. You know, that's a great question. And then focus on what you can control. What are the things that you can control? How much you save and where it goes, right? And then on how much you earn, that's sometimes in your control, but you can control how much you spend and where it goes. Okay, so just blocking out the noise and focusing on the things you can control is super helpful. If someone says everyone in the world should do this, or gives a blanket statement about finances, be skeptical, because everyone's situation is different. And there is a different answer for almost every person we deal with, right? Everyone's unique, and there's no right answer for everything. And then if you are with somebody or you have a partner, I think having a financial planner or counselor, the biggest thing that they should help you with is coming to an agreement and being on the same page financially. That's a huge issue that we help work through, where couples, whatever they might be, they just don't communicate well about money, because everyone comes from a different place with money. You might have a preconceived notion here, or I'm scared to do this, or scared to spend, or I hate debt, or I spend too much, or so everyone has different past with money. And so there's a lot of psychology involved in making sure that everyone communicates well. So whether you are married or not married, or you have a partner, or you're with somebody, or you're single, like, it's something with the way you communicate openly and honestly about money is super important in relationships. And I think any major questions, I know we're right at time. So we appreciate everyone coming.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. You know, like I said, this will be a recording. Here's our contact information, but Marty and I are also both on LinkedIn. So hit us up on LinkedIn, shoot us an email, find us on the Davidson, you know, through the Davidson LinkedIn college plan, and ask us any questions, or if you have any goals, you know, that you want to share, short-term or long-term. I guess I'd challenge everybody to think about, you know, what do they want to accomplish financially or personally in the next year? And then what do you want to accomplish, you know, long-term, 10 years and beyond? And feel free to share those with Marty or me, and maybe we can give you some advice on that.